In this video, Dr. Colonel Matthias Wasinger, who is the commander of the Jäger Bataillon 24, a mountain infantry unit, we are also calling Gebirgsjäger, answers various questions by my Patreon and subscribes to supporters. The questions deal with challenges, use of animals, equipment, difference in tactics and organization.
So we got here the first question. What are the key challenges for fighting in mountainous terrain and how are they overcome compared to normal fighting in flattened terrain? What kind of special mountaineer gear do they use? And if possible, is it special military or do they use civilian variants? How does an Austrian Mountain Infantry Company division compares to a NATO Mountain Infantry Company division in terms of equipment types focus? Well, it's an excellent question. To be frank, fighting in mountainous terrain poses unique and complex challenges compared to combat in flattened areas. The most significant factor is the environment itself, which is far more demanding than lowland terrain. Steep slopes, cliffs, and narrow valleys not only limit movement, but also severely complicate logistics, command and control, and the deployment of heavy weapons. Indeed, there's the weather. The weather is one of the most unpredictable and dangerous elements in mountain warfare, and it's rapidly changing. A second thing would be observation and engagement distances. They markedly differ. While observation ranges are often extended due to elevated vantage points, weapons range does not increase accordingly. So therefore, there's kind of a gap between observation and engagement. And indeed, there's the terrain inaccessibility. That means that most of the equipment has to be carried by the soldiers themselves, since even our, excellent vehicles, the BvS10 Hegelunds, at a certain point it reaches its limits, and from there on, it's the human machine carrying everything. And indeed, we're making best use of animals in the Austrian Armed Forces, in the Gebirgsjäger. These are our Haflinger horses. When it comes to the gear, we're using a specifically designed military gear, so there's nothing civilian in there. And in terms of NATO comparability, well, that's a good one. As you know, Austria is a NATO partner in the Partnership for Peace, and therefore we strive for interoperability. When it comes to the capabilities themselves, these are aligned with NATO allies. When it comes to the organization, there's indeed substantial differences to the kind of the other mountain troops, such as the Alpini in Italy. They still have regimental structures, or the German Gebirgsjäger. Well, as a NATO ally, they have structures that are totally in line with capability codes and statements, whereas we kind of mission tailor all of that. So capabilities, yes, comparable, but in organization, there are indeed some differences. So in summary, Austrian mountain troops are highly specialized. We have a military-grade alpine equipment, and we have NATO-comparable capabilities. And like for all mountain troops, the main challenges are the unpredictable weather, limited mobility, and logistic difficulty. And here we go with the next one. Peter saying, well, the Q's and A's, that's a great offer. I hope my questions are interesting to talk about. What has been the military context of using animals in mountain warfare? Are animals trained for war situations like gunfire and explosions? Are there changes in military strategy or tactics due to drone capabilities in mountain combat? Well, military use of animals in mountain warfare. So yes, we make best use of them. We make best use of our Haflinger horses. They are sure-footed on rocky and uneven ground. The compact size and endurance kind of favors maneuver in this very challenging, demanding environment. And they have the capacity to carry heavy, awkward military loads. So kind of, they're definitely an asset. We transport with them ammunition, food, rations, even part of heavy weapons. So it's kind of everything we can hang on them. We make best use of them. And even the high altitude is not an issue for them. We train them for war situations, so they're used to gunfire, explosions, other loud combat-related noises. All of that works perfectly with them, and the Haflinger itself is a brilliant choice from our point of view, not only because of its stamina and shape and all of that, but even because of its calmness and obedience under stress. So it's perfect. We train them, and we're very satisfied with them. Drones. The pipe. Yes, indeed, there is an influence even in mountain warfare. However, here comes the big however. And I'm talking now about drones, especially when it comes to sensors on the one hand side, so as intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets, and on the other hand side, indeed, engagement. The weather conditions are a challenge to them as well. So the high winds, the snow, fogs, sudden weather changes, all of that challenges drones and kind of severely limits their effectiveness. And then there's indeed the altitude is always an issue as well. So when we talk about a region like Osttirol in southwestern Austria, most of the mountains here are 3,000 meters above, which kind of, this is even for drones then challenging. There's signal interference due to the terrain that definitely interferes in the effectiveness or decreases the effectiveness of drones, and limited visibility. It's like for us human beings. In general terms, on a good day, we can see incredibly far, but the weather can change immediately, and then there's simply limited visibility. So yes, drones are tactically useful, but they do not eliminate the need for human and animal reconnaissance and transport in the mountains. Instead, they're integrated into tactical mountain warfare tactics as force multipliers, but they don't replace anything. Minion, what impact, if any, does the specific geology of complex terrain have in operations? Interesting question, to be honest. Well, yes, specific geology of complex terrain has significant impact on military operations. I'm talking about the rock type, soil stability, and the slope steepness. All of them affect mobility, cover, and construction. So, for example, loose scree or unstable rock can make movement hazardous and limit where troops can safely traverse or dig in. Hard bedrock may hinder the entrenchment or placement of explosives, while narrow, rigid lines and cliffs shape lines of sight and fire. So it's kind of, those are the obvious thing, but somebody always has to bear that in mind in mountain combat, so it must not be forgotten. In mountainous areas, geology also influences the risk of rock falls and avalanches, and exactly those factors historically triggered most of the losses and injuries in mountain warfare. So it's kind of, the environment is the main enemy. Let's put it like that. So there has to be an understanding of the geological makeup for the route selection, for positioning and survivability in complex terrain. Andrew came up with a very interesting question, and in fact, it's several questions. I will read the entire almost call it a questionnaire. Do mountain infantry have any differences from regular infantry at the squad fireteam level? Would there be any substantial differences between how his smallest combat subunits would approach a firefight to the sort of stuff the Wehrmacht or US infantry did in World War II? How much of the difference, if any, of mountain infantry from other infantry comes in the amount of supporting fire available at short notice? Does the combat support company get broken up into smaller components in action, and if so, are there any rules to this? The fact that this unit trains for both mountain and urban warfare leads to obvious questions about differences in the two environments. And supposedly Wellington was riding through Belgium sometime before 1815 and noticed the ridge at Waterloo as lovely ground for a defensive battle. Is there ideal terrain for offensive and defensive fighting for mountain troops? So, yeah. Let's get back to the first part of the question. Mountain infantry definitely differs from regular light infantry, primarily because of our training tactics and how combat support is applied. So those are the obvious thing. The structure of fire support teams and things like that, this is not so essential. It's more about the training and the tactics. So at the small unit level, the organization is largely the same as regular light infantry. The core difference lies in how we fight, not how we are structured. Mountain troops are trained for fragmented, decentralized combat in difficult terrain. And just by having said that, I will get back to that when it comes to fighting in build-up areas, urban warfare and things like that, because fragmented, decentralized combat in difficult terrain, that might sound familiar when talking about the other terrain. Movement is often vertical or split across ridge lines, so cohesion is challenged, and initiative at the small unit level is absolutely critical. When it comes to combat support differences, the availability of supporting fire is often limited in mountain warfare. This is due to the weather, the light of sight issue I mentioned previously already. You can usually on a good day observe, see by far farther than you can engage, but that can change immediately. And the mobility is limited, especially when it comes to heavy equipment, because when there's no viability anymore, when combat vehicles can't do it anymore, everything has to be carried. It's like that. So yes, we break down and distribute combat support elements, especially when it comes to mortars, anti-tank systems, and machine guns. The combat support companies are split into smaller elements attached directly to platoons and squads operating independently in different valleys or slopes. And in fact, there's no rigid doctrine preventing decentralization. It's deep in our military culture that we fit things for purpose and kind of try to think out of the box. And at the end of the day, we have to achieve combat effectiveness and efficiency. Mountain warfare versus urban combat training. Interesting question. And mountain infantry, we are very well suited for urban combat because there's a certain familiarity with vertical movement, obviously. We use cover, concealment, and small unit tactics in both environments, and there's the requirement for high physical fitness and decentralized decision making. So yes, there's kind of is familiar, and this is kind of a scenario as well for mountain troops. It's not anymore merely fighting in mountain warfare and high altitude. It's very often kind of passing through mountainous terrain and afterwards being capable of fighting in build-up areas. And last but not least, the ideal terrain is kind of a myth. In practice, all terrain is a compromise, and mountains are inherently hostile to both attacker and defender. There are narrow passes like Thermopylae that favor defenders. However, you can easily be outflanked or isolated. There are open ridge lines. They offer fields of fire, but on the other hand side are vulnerable to weather and exposure, and the steep slopes that make both attacking and withdrawing risky. So commanders might prefer indeed broken terrain with multiple covert routes for movement, controllable choke points in delaying actions, and positions for good observation, but also protected fallback lines. So ultimately, the mountains themselves are an adversary. They shape, limit, and often sabotage even the best laid plans. In that sense, mountain combat isn't just about fighting an enemy, it's about surviving and outmaneuvering the terrain.
Big thank you to Matthias for answering these questions. Thank you to my Patreons and Andrew for the questions. Thank you for watching and see you next time.